The Exodus. Admiral Tezcar of the Galactic Alliance stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Vigilance, staring at the blue-green world rotating below. Earth, the humans' homeworld. Even after 3 years, he still found it difficult to comprehend how quickly they had adapted to interstellar politics. Remarkable creatures, said Science Counselor Vela, her luminescent skin pulsing with the soft blues of contemplative thought. Did you know they've already improved our propulsion efficiency by 8%? 8% in 3 years, when we hadn't made improvements of even 1% in the last century. Tezcar's facial tentacles rippled in the Calaxian equivalent of a smile. They are enthusiastic. That's one word for it, Vela replied. I would say relentless. The Alliance had discovered Earth purely by accident, a routine survey of a supposedly uninhabited solar system that yielded the unexpected. An industrialized world on the cusp of interstellar travel. The humans had been invited to join the Alliance, as was protocol for all sapient species that hadn't yet destroyed themselves. Most took decades to integrate. Humans had done it in months. Admiral. The voice of his communications officer crackled through his neural implant. Priority message from Alliance Command. The Scourge has been detected crossing the Taurasi expanse. Estimated arrival in Alliance space, 30 standard cycles. Tezcar's blood turned cold. The Scourge. Every 500 years, like clockwork, they emerged from the galactic rim, a swarm of biomechanical horrors that consumed everything in their path. Last time, they had devoured 3 star systems before being beaten back. This time, intelligence suggested they were coming in greater numbers. Alert all Alliance worlds, he ordered. Begin evacuations of border systems and deploy the fleet to defensive positions, and inform Earth's government immediately. Within 2 days, representatives from all 17 Alliance species had convened at the Central Nexus for an emergency council. The human delegate, Ambassador Chen, sat quietly as reports of the Scourge's advance were detailed. When it was her turn to speak, she simply asked for access to all historical data on previous Scourge incursions. We cannot simply give you unrestricted access to Alliance military archives, protested the Valerian representative. Then you condemn us all, Chen replied calmly. My people need to understand what we're facing. After heated debate, the Council authorized the release of the archives to Earth. What followed puzzled Tezcar and the other Alliance leaders. Instead of committing ships to the defensive line, the humans began a systematic evacuation of their planet. All of Earth's orbital stations were dismantled. Mining operations in their asteroid belt ceased. Colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter were abandoned. They're retreating, growled General Dorax of the Centaurian Legion. Cowards. Humanity has never shown cowardice before, Tezcar countered. This is something else. 1 month after learning of the Scourge, Earth's entire population, all 11 billion humans, had disappeared from Alliance space. The only human vessels remaining were diplomatic couriers, each carrying identical messages to every Alliance world. We go to prepare. Hold fast. We will return. Then they were gone. Every ship, every colony, every human presence in known space, vanished through what sensors identified as some form of previously unknown spatial tunneling technology. They fled, said Councillor Mox of the Trilaxian hegemony, as the Alliance War Council convened again. We welcomed them, shared our knowledge, and at the first sign of danger, they abandoned us. Perhaps, Tezcar said, or perhaps there is more to their plan than we understand. But as the Scourge drew closer and humans remained absent, even Tezcar's faith began to waver. The defensive fleets mobilized without Earth's promised contingent of ships. Emergency shelters were prepared without human engineering assistance, and as the first Scourge scouts appeared on the edge of Alliance space, not a single human stood with them to face the coming storm. When the Scourge vanguard obliterated the outpost at Hexer Prime, 40,000 souls lost in an instant, the absence of humanity was no longer a mystery to contemplate, but a betrayal to lament. The Alliance stood alone against the darkness. Tezcar watched the battle displays aboard his flagship as the first wave of Scourge vessels crashed against the Alliance defensive line. His crew, composed of 12 different species, but not one human, worked with grim efficiency as they coordinated the counterattack. If they were going to return, his executive officer said quietly, they would have done so by now. Tezcar could only nod as he gazed at the stars, wondering what secrets the humans had discovered in the archives that had prompted their exodus, and whether the Alliance would survive long enough to ever learn the truth. The Forgotten. 25 years passed with no word from humanity. The Galactic Alliance had survived, barely, the first waves of the Scourge invasion. 3 border systems had been completely overrun, billions dead, millions more displaced. But the combined might of the 17 Alliance species had managed to establish a containment perimeter, holding the Scourge at bay in a grueling war of attrition. For the first few years, some had still believed the humans would return as promised. By the 10th year, human had become a pejorative in most Alliance languages, synonymous with traitor. By the 25th year, the younger generation barely remembered them at all. Admiral Tezcar, now Grand Admiral of the Combined Defense Forces, had aged considerably. His once vibrant tentacles had faded to a dull gray, and his exoskeleton had hardened with the calcium deposits of advanced age. Yet he still commanded from the bridge of the Unyielding Purpose, the newest Alliance flagship. The Scourge have broken through at Sector 7G, reported Commander Loxer, his holographic projection flickering as the transmission fought through the interference. We need reinforcements immediately. There are no reinforcements, Commander, Tezcar replied, the weight of command heavy in his voice. Hold as long as you can, then execute a fighting retreat at the secondary line. The tactical display showed the grim reality. The Scourge were adapting, evolving their strategies faster than the Alliance could counter them. Intelligence estimated that within another 5 years, they would break through to the core worlds. Grand Admiral, Science Director Vela interrupted, the same Vela who had once marveled at human ingenuity, now the head of the Alliance's desperate weapons research division. We're detecting unusual gravitational anomalies in the Parisian Void. The Void, a region of space near the galactic rim known for strange phenomena and navigational hazards. It had been largely ignored during the war, being strategically unimportant and far from any inhabited system. Scourge activity? Tezcar asked. No, sir. The signature is, unlike anything we've recorded before, it's as if space itself is being twisted. Tezcar ordered long-range probes dispatched to investigate. The War Council dismissed the anomalies as irrelevant, a curiosity that could be studied after the Scourge were defeated, if such a day ever came. But something about the reports nagged at Tezcar's intuition. 3 days later, a probe returned with disturbing readings. The anomalies were growing, spreading across a region of space larger than an entire star system. And they were moving, slowly but deliberately, towards Scourge-controlled territory. Could it be a natural phenomenon? Asked Captain Jorel, Tezcar's new executive officer. Nothing about this is natural, Vela replied, reviewing the data. These are artificial distortions in space-time, created with a level of precision that exceeds our theoretical understanding of physics. Before Tezcar could order further investigation, crisis erupted. The Scourge launched a massive offensive against the Alliance's primary defensive installation at Nexus Point Delta, the linchpin of their containment strategy. If it fell, the path to the core worlds would be wide open. All available ships to Nexus Point Delta, Tezcar ordered. This is the stand we must make. The Alliance fleet, a shadow of its former strength, converged on the massive space station that guarded the only stable wormhole route to the inner systems. The Scourge forces they faced were overwhelming. Bioships that regenerated damage almost as quickly as it was inflicted, drone swarms that could strip a cruiser to its frame in minutes, and massive hive carriers that disgorged endless waves of attack craft. As the battle raged, political divisions within the Alliance resurfaced. The Valerian magistracy, facing the extinction of their species, proposed abandoning the outer systems entirely and concentrating all remaining forces to protect their homeworld. The Centaurian Legion accused them of cowardice and threatened to withdraw from the alliance if such a plan was adopted. After all these years, Tezcar remarked bitterly to Vela as they watched the Alliance Council's emergency session dissolve into accusations and recriminations, "We still haven't learned to stand united." "Perhaps that's why the humans left," Vela replied. "They saw what we couldn't, that we were doomed not by the scourge, but by our own nature." 2 more systems fell as the Alliance bickered. Nexus Point Delta held. Barely, but the cost was staggering. Half the station lay in ruins, and the defending fleet had been reduced to a scattered collection of damaged vessels, barely capable of maintaining a defensive screen. And then, in the midst of despair, the anomalies from the Varisian void began to multiply exponentially. Thousands appeared throughout Alliance and Scourge-controlled space, causing disruptions in communications and navigation systems across both territories. In the command center of Nexus Point Delta, now his forward headquarters, Tezcar watched the sensor readings with growing unease. The anomalies had formed a pattern, a vast, complex network spanning half the galaxy. The Scourge had noticed too. Their attacks had become erratic, their formations breaking apart as they responded to this new unknown variable. "Grand Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission on an old frequency, one that hasn't been used in 25 years. Tezcar finished, a strange hope kindling within him. "Put it through." The message was simple, broadcast on all channels, in all Alliance languages. "We have returned. Hold position. Assistance incoming." Across the battle zone, officers and crew looked to each other in confusion and disbelief. Many had never even seen a human. To most, they were just another failed species, one that had abandoned the fight when needed most. But Tezcar remembered. And as the anomalies began to pulse with energy, tearing open the fabric of space itself, he allowed himself to believe, for the first time in decades, that perhaps the humans had kept their promise after all. The return. The anomalies collapsed in perfect synchronization, creating a network of spatial apertures unlike anything recorded in Alliance history. What emerged from them defied comprehension. Ships, if they could even be called that, of impossible scale and design. The smallest dwarf the largest Alliance dreadnought. The largest blotted out entire star fields, their dimensions challenging the very concept of mobile constructs. "By the eternal void," whispered Captain Jorel, staring at the tactical display. "What are they?" The answer came in the form of a transmission broadcast from the lead vessel, a relatively modest construct merely the size of a small moon. "Alliance forces, this is Admiral Helena Chen of the Earth Expeditionary Force. Please stand by for coordinated defense operations." Chen. The name triggered ancient memories in Tezcar's mind. The human ambassador from 25 years ago, now an admiral. How was that possible? She would be ancient by human standards. "Admiral Chen," Tezcar responded, his voice thick with emotion. "This is Grand Admiral Tezcar. The Alliance welcomes your return, though I confess your timing is unexpected." A holographic projection materialized on the command deck, a human female, her features bearing only the slightest resemblance to the young ambassador he remembered. Her hair was silver, her face lined with age, but her eyes burned with the same intensity. "Admiral Tezcar," she said, genuine warmth in her voice. "You've aged well for someone who's been fighting a holding action for 25 years. I apologize for our delayed return. The preparations took longer than anticipated." Preparations. Tezcar gestured to the massive vessels now forming a perimeter around the besieged Nexus Point. "What exactly have you been preparing?" "The end of the Scourge," Chen replied simply. "Forever." The battle that followed would later be described in Alliance historical records as the Luminous Reckoning. The human vessels, they called them arcs, moved with impossible precision, their weapons operating on principles that Alliance scientists couldn't begin to comprehend. They didn't fire energy beams or projectiles. Instead, they manipulated fundamental forces, creating localized singularities that devoured Scourge bioships whole or accelerating entropic decay that caused enemy vessels to disintegrate from within. The Scourge, for the first time in recorded history, began to retreat. But the human arcs pursued relentlessly, their spatial aperture technology allowing them to appear wherever the Scourge attempted to regroup. From the observation deck of Nexus Point Delta, Tezcar and the assembled Alliance leadership watched in awe as centuries of terror ended in mere hours. When it was over, when the last Scourge hive carrier had been reduced to constituent atoms, Admiral Chen requested a meeting with the full Alliance Council. The gathering took place aboard the human flagship, a vessel they called Prometheus Ascendant. "Why did you leave?" demanded the Valerian representative, the first question voiced after formal greetings were exchanged. "Why abandon us for 25 years only to return now?" Chen smiled sadly. "We didn't abandon you. We went to find answers, and to build what was needed to implement them." She gestured, and a holographic display activated, showing the galaxy from above, but not as it currently existed. This was the galaxy as it might appear millions of years in the future, with stars rearranged into unfamiliar patterns. "When you gave us access to the historical archives, we discovered something none of you had pieced together," Chen explained. "The Scourge doesn't emerge from the rim every 500 years by chance. They're being driven, harvested and weaponized by something far worse that exists between galaxies, something ancient that sees all life as nothing but resources to be consumed." Murmurs of disbelief spread through the council. "We call them the Harvesters," Chen continued. "They've been using the Scourge as advanced scouts for millions of years, sending them in waves to test defenses and collect biological data before the main force arrives. According to our calculations, this cycle was to be the last. The Harvesters themselves would have arrived within a decade." "If what you say is true," Tezcar said, "then where are these Harvesters now?" Chen's expression hardened. "We destroyed them." She explained how humanity had used the 25 years to develop technologies that allowed them to travel between galaxies, to take the fight directly to the enemy rather than waiting for the invasion. "The arcs aren't warships," she said. "They're construction engines designed to reshape reality itself. We've spent the last 15 years building a network of gravitational lenses around the Harvester staging area in intergalactic space, collapsing their entire civilization into an artificial black hole of our creation." The council sat in stunned silence. "You could have told us," Vela said finally. "We could have helped." "No," Chen replied gently. "You couldn't have. Your civilizations are built on consensus and careful advancement. Humanity, we're different. We needed to pursue technologies that break fundamental laws of physics, technologies too dangerous to develop in populated space. We needed to make decisions that would have seemed monstrous without the context of what we were fighting." "And the Scourge?" asked Tezcar. "Are they truly finished?" "Yes. The remaining forces were drones, programmed to continue their mission even with their masters destroyed. We eliminated their control mechanisms. They won't trouble the galaxy again." In the days that followed, humanity began the process of reintegration with the Alliance. Earth itself remained uninhabited, converted, Chen explained, into a massive computational substrate that helped power the physics-defying technologies they had developed. The human population now lived aboard the arcs or on terraformed worlds beyond the galactic rim. Some Alliance species welcomed them back with open arms. Others remained suspicious of a species that had developed such godlike power in mere decades, but none could deny the debt owed to humanity for ending the ancient threat. Tezcar, in the twilight of his life, found himself once again standing on an observation deck beside Admiral Chen, watching the stars. "I never lost faith that you would return," he told her. "Though I confess, I didn't expect this." Chen smiled. "Humanity has always been defined by extremes. Admiral. When we're cornered, we don't just fight back. We change the nature of the game entirely. A dangerous quality, Tezkar observed. Yes, Chen agreed. That's why we've chosen to establish our new homeworlds outside of traditional space. We'll remain part of the Alliance, but at a distance. Some powers shouldn't exist too close to civilization. And if another threat emerges, Chen turned to him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Then the Sentinels will return. That's the promise we make to the galaxy. And to ourselves. Never again will we be unprepared. Never again will we merely react. As the Arks prepared to depart for their extragalactic homes, leaving behind only diplomatic vessels and cultural exchanges, a new term entered the Alliance lexicon. Worlds facing natural disasters or conflict would report the arrival of human ships, bringing aid and protection before vanishing again into the depths of space. They called them the Sentinels, watchers at the edge of reality, guardians who had transcended conventional existence to stand eternal vigil against the darkness between stars. And though they had become something beyond what any Alliance species could comprehend, Tezkar understood one thing clearly. The humans had never abandoned them. They had simply gone to fight a war on a scale no one else could imagine. A war waged across galaxies and dimensions to ensure that life itself would continue to flourish. In that knowledge, the Admiral found peace.